Presentations for you today. So the first one will be Ollie Bolton, who's the founder and CEO of Armand, as well as Shiv Agarwal, who is the CEO and founder of MyEarth.ID. And they're going to be giving a presentation on Hedera Dapp development, followed by Giro Olcott. And if any of you sort of tuned into Hedera 18, he gave a fantastic presentation there. So he's going to be telling us all about renewable energy microgrids. Then after the presentations are finished, we're all going to get together, sort of network, sort of myself and Paul Bajera, who works for the marketing team over there, are going to be on hand to answer any of the questions that you've got. And we'll have some pizzas, some drinks, and yeah, it should be a good evening. So I'll hand it over to Ollie.
Cheers. Thank you. We're actually using the mic for the Facebook stream, so that's that's why there's no sound coming out, but it is working, so I'm told. Thank you very much for coming over to the wilds of West London. It's much appreciated, and for taking time out your evening to join us this evening. I'm just going to give you a really quick update on the kind of state of the general Dapp ecosystem around the world, and then look at specifically Hedera's dapps. Touch on some key Hedera Hashgraph features, and then we're going to have 3 specific updates from Shiv on MyEarth.ID, myself on my project Armand, and then Giro for his renewable energy grid microgrids project. And then we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end. So just to recap for clarity, what is a public distributed ledger? So there's 5 key kind of components that make up the properties of a distributed ledger. Firstly, it's immutable. Secondly, it's publicly accessible. Thirdly, distributed. Fourthly, cryptographically secure. And fifthly, censorship resistant. And to clarify exactly what a decentralized application is, although there's no formal kind of definition that's agreed upon in the community, we can agree that it utilizes a public distributed ledger for a key service. So just kind of looking at the global kind of state of decentralized dapps, and there's almost 2,500 active dapps around the world at the moment, across all ecosystems, and that was up until the end of last month. And last month there are 170 new dapps that joined the global ecosystem. If we look down at the most active users for decentralized apps, then on a monthly basis, then exchanges is top with just over 50,000 active monthly users. Games comes in second with almost 35,000, and then finance in third with 24,000. And it's really interesting, if we compare dapps to regular apps, there's currently roughly 2,432 dapps around the world. And compared to the iOS App Store, there's 2.1 million, and the Google Play Store, there's 2.6. So there's certainly room to grow the Dapp ecosystem. So when do you need a decentralized solution? There's a lot of people perhaps building decentralized products just for the sake of it. But the real reason why you would need a decentralized application is when you can't or don't want to trust a third party. Just touching on some specific industry DLT use cases, the obvious one being financial services, with payment processing being a key component, being able to pay parties in real time without an intermediary. Asset tokenization, which I think we're going to see lots of this year with the emergence of security token offerings, whether that's tokenizing assets, bonds, titles, deeds easily and securely. Routing and settlements with smart contracts, we can now settle transactions automatically, cross-border, with low costs and high efficiency. In the media and entertainment space, there's some interesting micropayment royalty dapps that are emerging that we'll touch on in a second, where users pay only based on the consumption of the content that they consume, and content creators can be paid instantly. There's some great efficiencies with regards to advertising revenues, and also loyalty programs, which Armand touches on, which I'm going to go into a bit more detail shortly. Also in gaming, with micropayments, non-fungible collectibles, and transparent esports. So we can look at some specific examples that people are using Hedera in the gaming sector as well. And finally, in logistics, which is also an area that my project touches on, with regards to supply chain transparency, tracking goods, making sure the supply chain is accurate and up to date, data consolidation, multi-party, creating a trusted overview of a product's history, and conflict remediation, whether that's logistical delays, damaged goods, but knowing exactly what the issues are and how to remediate them quickly and efficiently. Looking specifically at Hedera's Dapp ecosystem, there are currently over 100 dapps that have been committed to building on Hedera. Some examples on here. There's over 5,000 active developers in the ecosystem, and the SDK has been downloaded over 45,000 times. So there's a really engaged and active community here building out the Dapp ecosystem. Looking at a few examples, Carbon, which is a stable coin building on Hedera, is one of the more popular projects, well-known projects. It's backed by real USD, utilizing smart contracts. It's currently on Ethereum at the moment, and their plan is to move across to Hedera due to the lower costs and the increased security. Hero, as I touched on, is a great example using micropayments, paying artists, users paying artists per stream directly to artists, and also they developed a really interesting, innovative proof of stream mechanic, really making the most of Hedera's technology. And then we have finally Alto, which is it's a gaming platform for items in game where you can create these non-fungible ERC 721 products and have ownerships linked specifically to users. And then I'm just going to touch on Hashgraph versus blockchains, and I know this isn't the focus of the session, but just to kind of again pull out some key differences. So Hashgraph isn't a blockchain; it's a consensus algorithm, and it's the key. One of the key differentiators versus blockchain is the speed and achieving over hundreds of thousands of transactions a second. It's a directed acyclic graph using the novel gossip on gossip virtual voting mechanism, which is exclusive to Hashgraph. Doesn't require proof of work, so it's much more energy efficient. It's the most secure DLT, which is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. And due to the fact it's a patented system, there's a degree of protection and stability, knowing that there won't be forks on the platform. Compared with blockchains, they are intentionally slow, very energy and energy intensive and inefficient, no guaranteed consensus, lack of GDPR compliance, whereas actually with Hedera you can remove data from their DLT and prove it's been removed. So they're one of the only DLTs that can do that. And as we know, there's a history of issues with regards to governance and forks with a lot of other blockchain DLTs. Just wanted to quickly touch on the mainnet and testnet early access launch, which is now open to the community. Firstly, products release. So the platform, the mainnet early access is being released for micropayments, and I'm just going to give you some details of how you can get involved with that and set up an account. You can also request testnet access development via the Hedera SDK. The portal is now live at portal.hedera.com. The wallet is now live. You can download on iOS and Android. And there's 2 example open source applications, Daily Timestamp, which is a news aggregation website, and then also the Hedera browser extension, which you can use for micropayments in relation to Daily Timestamp. Some links, help.hedera.com for FAQ getting started, docs.hedera.com for developer quick start guide, and then hashgraph.org for everything else. So there's currently a community testing program that's now live, where you can earn up to 1,000 HBARs, which is roughly $120 by performing micropayments on the mainnet. And you can set up a Hedera portal login today, set up a wallet, connect it to the micropayments browser extension, and start earning and testing some funds today. This is to basically help the Hedera test the mainnet and distribute the HBARs more widely for security purposes, for proof of stake. The developer and testnets can be accessed in these links here. There's limited availability and you need to request access. And also you can download the cryptocurrency smart contracts and file storage services on the GitHub repository. The link is there. I'm now going to pass you over to Shiv, who's going to talk more about his project MyEarth.ID.
Thank you, Ollie. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Okay. Fine. So, MyEarth.ID, basically it's a decentralized identity management platform to be built on Hashgraph. Let me play a quick introductory video which would give an overview. I think there's some problem with the audio. Okay, let's replay it. Sorry about that. Can you please rewind it? And yeah. Thank you.
Using the power of cryptography and blockchain, EarthID provides a universal identity platform that lets you stay in control of your identity. EarthID eliminates the identity thefts and frauds, thereby reducing the associated cost. Identity validation has always been a yes or no decision, whereas our identity scoring mechanism, Trust Score, acts as an identity quotient and enables innovators to do more. Say Judy needs to fly across the globe. During her trip, she shares her identity with several organizations, making her vulnerable to potential identity theft. EarthID enables her to share specific information securely. Moreover, not all organizations have systems to validate the authenticity of the provided documents. The level of her trust score allows organizations to make better decisions. Whether at the airport check-in, security, car rental, or even at the hotel, her identity gets validated quickly and seamlessly. Visit us at MyEarth.ID.
Okay.
As the world becomes more and more connected.
I think it's a sound problem. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so as I mentioned, right, so EarthID is a decentralized identity management platform. So our vision is basically to create, to simplify the process of validating human identity through the use of universal identity mechanism. We are basically trying to reduce the cost of maintaining identity using a global platform. The key challenge that we are trying to solve is identity thefts and frauds through the power of cryptography and technology. We are trying to onboard every human being on the earth to basically provide seamless access to various services. The key issues that we are trying to resolve are identity thefts and associated frauds. The existing solutions, they are complicated and costly. Centralized ID storages, which are prone to hacking. Lack of borderless identity, and then lack of reliability quotient, which is basically how do you measure the strength of someone's identity. What is our solution? So EarthID, as I said, right, it's a universal ID, it's a borderless identity, and then we are going to build over Hedera Hashgraph because of the key point that Ollie mentioned earlier. We are giving the control of the identity documents to the user. It's basically decentralized storage on personal mobile devices, cost-effective, hassle-free, and then basically it can be used for both online and offline services. Trust Score, it's a proprietary ID scoring mechanism reflecting confidence in one's ID. It empowers service providers and organizations to adjust level of and access to their services and information. So the key aspect, right? So basically EarthID is self-sovereignty. So user owns the data and controls the identity information. Privacy, so the user can decide what or which piece of information can be shared or should be shared. ID monetization, so if you use the EarthID platform across different service providers or organizations, you earn tokens. Sybil resistance, it's one Earth, one ID. reputation. So with Trust Score, basically we are building that incentive to for good behavior. Pay per use. So with respect to access to identity information, it would be via APIs, and then you basically pay per use. So it optimizes the overall cost of identity management. Pricing strategy. So obviously organizations can use the Trust Score to control access and charges to their services. So basically, it's a mobile app through which you can register yourself, you can upload your documents, and then it basically measures the information that you provide, and then with an algorithm, it creates a trust score. And then the more you use the app, the better your trust score gets. And when, let's say, if you visit a bank or any other service provider, and then if you can actually provide your Earth.ID, and then they would request access, and then you can either accept that request or deny, and then on basis of that, the specified documents would be shared with the service provider. Trust score, again, basically it's a score, right? It's like credit score. So the more you use your credit cards, the better it gets. And similarly here, the more you use your Earth.ID across different platforms and partners, the better it gets. And obviously, if there are fraudulent activities on your side, then obviously that trust score can be impacted negatively. Where it can be used, so basically the applications are numerous. So it can be applied in e-commerce industry for validating identities of users and vendors, financial institutions, travel and hospitality, utility services, healthcare, social platforms, and then eventually from long-term perspective, visas and immigrations as well. So basically, it's like digitizing the ID and basically making it borderless so that you can access different services across industries. Competition, actually, so there are a few platforms who are already doing identity management, right? And then some are using some specific use cases, but we are like more a global platform. And then from differentiation perspective, we are using, from technology perspective, it's Hashgraph. And then there are some key benefits with respect to using Hashgraph versus other blockchains. So performance, security, and then a few more things which Ollie talked about earlier. See, our thought process is that our competitors, they are competition today, and they are challenging us to drive innovation and perfection, but partners tomorrow, because obviously this is such a big idea, and then you would need partners to onboard every human being on Earth, right? So that is where they would be, it's like a partnership model that we would pursue in the future. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, any questions, sir? Yeah, yeah. Sure.
I use Civic.
Yeah.
I invest in Civic. I've done some work with them.
Yeah.
And the trouble is that it's for a security identity.
Sorry, I need the mic.
For identity management, there has to be buy-in. It has to become mainstream. Like Civic, they said, oh, you can use Civic and just walk up to a nightclub and and they can validate your ID and your age and stuff like that. But that's the trouble, is that no one is bought in to it. And so Civic, was just sitting there on a shelf collecting dust. And, they're a good product. And I'm just wondering how, you're going to get buy-in from, like border control and stuff, and financial institutions.
That's a very good question, actually. So the thing is, like, see, obviously technology is the easier part, right? I think we already know that. So we can build technology easily, but then how do we apply that technology to solve problems is the biggest challenge, right? And that is where a lot of platforms have already tried to solve that problem. Some have failed, and then some have basically limited success. What we are trying to do is, like, so with Earth.ID, what we have done is, like, we have a global team. So we have representation in US, Ireland, UK, Bulgaria, India, and Australia. So what we are trying to do is, like, we are basically trying to bring representation to different countries and then build partnerships, local partnerships over there with the government and with the different organizations. So we would basically start a pilot with the e-commerce industry, but then eventually, slowly and steadily, we'll move to other use cases. But this is an uphill battle, right? Because obviously, I think this is something you need to prove the pilot, and then once you have proven the benefits of the technology of the platform, then actually you can say, okay, you have the model is successful. But I think the way we are, so we did a research on the e-commerce industry in India and across, and then they are actually spending around $5 billion annually on their earth on their identity management, and there's a huge cost of frauds. So obviously what we are doing is like we are doing this research, we are investing in research and proving the value theoretically and then practically, right? So that is how we are approaching it. Obviously it is going to take time, and then but we need the right partnership, and then we are building those partnerships. Okay. This one. Thank you, Ali.
It's my daily workout.
Thanks for presentation. You've mentioned the disadvantages of blockchain, right? So could you list technological disadvantages of blockchain in comparison to Hashgraph? Why have you chosen the Hashgraph? Thanks.
Thank you, Ali. Yeah. I'm not sure. Can you hear me just like that? Or? Oh, okay, fine, sure. Yeah, so the thing is that from technology perspective, I think as Oli mentioned earlier in his presentation, that with respect to differentiation, one is the performance, right? A normal blockchain or other platforms that are there in the market, they are talking about few hundreds of transactions per second. Hashgraph is talking about hundreds and thousands of, like 100,000 transactions per second. So that is the biggest difference. And with respect to EarthID, since we're talking about billions of people, I think we need that, right? So the number of transactions that we can do per second. Secondly, the security, so Byzantine fault tolerant, that is the highest level of security that anybody can build in any system. And that is basically, that gives an edge. And since we're talking about identity information, we need that. Then basically about legal aspects with respect to storage of information, that again, I think not many other platforms have that, and basically Hashgraph has that differentiation. So I think these are some of the factors. So obviously we did, when we started this EarthID, this thing, we actually compared a few platforms, and what we found is like Hashgraph is giving us the key differentiators that we want to basically to be better at what we want to do. Does that answer the question? Okay. Thank you, Ali.
Cheers, thank you. So I'm just going to talk for 10 minutes or so about my project Armand. So with Armand, in a nutshell, we're creating a new economic model and user application that rewards people for becoming more responsible consumers. Just to give a bit of background to why we've created the project, as we've all read, especially in the last few months, we are in quite a difficult situation with regards to the climate crisis. Looking to our land, every year we destroy 6 million hectares of forest. In our sea, we dump 8 million tons of plastic into our oceans every year, and pollution to our atmosphere is at an all-time high. The human knock-on effects of this are that by 2050, climate refugees, or people who are fleeing their homes because the sea level rises or being unable to grow food to feed themselves or their family, are set to hit the hundreds of millions. There was some research by Oxfam yesterday, and the world's 26 richest individuals have the same wealth as the poorest 50% of the global population. And looking to our health, the ingestion of plastic and chemicals and their derivatives is at an all-time high. As we've seen from the IPCC report a few months ago, we have to get to global net zero by 2050 if we are going to stay within 1.5 degrees, which is now the agreed ceiling that we should try and aim towards. Anything above 2 degrees is not an option for us, because it will unlock runaway climate change and would be devastating for humanity. So what people aren't aware is it's really through our wallets and our purchasing consumption patterns that is the biggest effect and the biggest contributor to climate change. And we conducted some research, and 52% of our personal footprint comes from the goods and the services that we consume. We talk about our wallet being the biggest weapon of mass destruction. Some of the challenges that we also face is awareness about actually the climate crisis and how bad the situation is, and the role of our consumption patterns. People also feel pretty helpless, and actually their individual actions can't make a difference. And there often is a high cost associated with more ethical, low-impact products. And there's a lot of greenwashing out there from brands, and it's hard to know who's really ethical and who's just doing sort of token initiatives, and sometimes these brands are hard to find as well. And ultimately, as a user, as a consumer, it's difficult for us to tell, are my actions really making a difference? And to evaluate our changing behaviors. So our solution is designed to tackle all of these issues, and it's involves our app, which is actually, the MVP is live on the App Store and iOS and Android app stores, which is essentially an AI-powered app designed to engage and reward users for responsible consumption, which I'll come into in a bit more detail. And then we also have a wider economy, which is an ecosystem that helps brands meet Armand's environmental and social standards helps brands that meet Armand's environmental and social standards grow their sales, which I'll also touch on in a little bit. In the app, there's three main components. One is buying challenges, and this is a mechanic an incentive scheme that we've created that financially rewards users with Armand tokens for buying responsible brands. That could be switching to a fair trade coffee, switching to renewable energy, or buying quality sustainable clothing. So we currently have Fact, which is live as our proof of concept on Armand, and there's some cans over here, so you can grab some and scan them in the app. And that's live at the moment. As a brand, we put 2p behind every can into the reward fund. We're getting about 1 in 5 people that buy a can scanning a can, so you get 10p every time you scan a can of Fact. And the reason why we're an ethical product is because we're a registered B Corp company. The second area is action challenges, which we'll be launching later on in the year. So this is designed to support education and encourage lifestyle changes that will lower users' carbon emissions. For example, taking part in a carbon footprinting analysis, reading, watching educational content, accepting physical challenges like sticking to a 5-minute shower. And we'll be using impact points to reward people for doing these. And then finally, we have the offsetting challenges, where users can buy carbon credits with either the Armand tokens that they have been rewarded with, or with their own funds. And we're developing a system where you can offset your flights, for example, or your car usage. The key benefits for brands to join the ecosystem is the obvious increase in sales and increase in their customer base. We will enable them to build much more sort of close and intimate one-on-one relationships with their customers. Brands can also understand their customers much better, because they'll be able to see anonymized user data around the scans of the product linked to location and time, which is something we've as a brand owner, we really have no idea who our customers are. So I'm quite excited to help brands understand their customers better. And ultimately, we're building in a customer feedback system as well for brands. So our token model has evolved over the last few months, and we've now got to this dual token model system, where we have a security token called Alma, which is linked to equity in our UK company. And then we have Armand coins, which is our stable coin, which will power the ecosystem. The security token is for raising funds, and the stablecoin is underwritten by fiat that the brands invest into the ecosystem. Stepping back, the project is structured with two entities. One is the Armand Foundation, which is a Swiss-based foundation which owns all the IP and the tech, and essentially protects the whole project from any acquisition by any other entity. And then, as I mentioned, we have the Armand Impacts Limited, which is linked to the security token, which is the custodian for all commercial activity and the investment vehicle for the project. For this year, we're just focusing with B Corp businesses who have already undergone a rigorous due diligence scheme, but we're also developing an Armand charter, which will be linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Some of the key attributes are listed here. And we'll be developing our own impact assessment for brands and services to join the platform. Our simplified roadmap, we've had seed investment at the beginning of last year. We have our MVP Stage 1 app that's already launched. We're about to launch a private placement component of our STO next month. We're working with Token Market, who are part of the cohort 4 of the FCA's regulatory sandbox. So we'll be one of the first security token offerings, which is really exciting. And then we'll have a public placement for 1.7 million, which will occur around March. We're on track to launch our second MVP Stage 2 in April for our app, which will integrate some of the builds that I mentioned. And we're on track for the main app launch in September, which will have all of the challenge functionality. I've got a quick demo of the current app, which I'm going to play. So you can see opening a can of Fact, and the code's automatically picked up. You can see the token rewards. You can see the story about the product. You click on the trail. You can see an overview of where the ingredients have come from. Click on the lemon flavor. You can see it comes from Aromatech in France, from lemons from Italy. If you click on the lemon juice, again from a Sicilian cooperative. The aluminium can is from Crown Bevcam in France, with aluminium from European origin. Activity shows you all of the brands that you've scanned and the associated rewards. And then in the wallet, you can click on a specific brand, and you can see a breakdown of the products that you've scanned, nearest stockists, link to buy online, and then a related activity for that specific product. So again, this is live now, and it's quite basic, but the next version will be a lot more advanced, and we'll also integrate our chatbot, which will be kind of underpin and organize the whole app, and also run the onboarding for the app as well. That's it. Thank you very much. Did you have any questions at all? And if not, I'm going to pass you over to Giro, and we're going to plug in your tablet and do a switch.
One more little did I read? Excellent. Okay, sorry about the disorganization, folks. I'll take this. Let me just get into a slideshow from the beginning. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. It's always a great pleasure to talk to the Hedera community. Ever since I first started on this journey, watching all the little videos and reading the white papers, it's been a great experience. The energy and the kind of synergy among all of the community of Hedera is really great. I'm used to working in like fintech, NGOs, government agencies, and things like that, and the switch and the change of working with Hedera is amazing. It's an energy and a synergy that we have together that we should nurture and evolve, and I think that there is an enormous amount of collaborative possibilities between us. And from what Ollie does, I mean, just listening to his presentation is a great sort of like entree to what I'm going to do, and the security ID and all of these things can come together on this Hedera platform. I think is really wonderful. So Guard Global, we're the sort of software development folks, and we've been working in the blockchain space for a few years now, but pretty much we're working almost entirely with Hedera at the moment. Power Transition is an entity we created, Guard Global and the Carbon Free Group, to create this micro grid technology. Okay. Now I'm gonna, since I have a few extra minutes, unfortunately Frank apparently couldn't make it. I'll just throw this confusing thing. I don't know. Does anyone know Gartner and Forrester? Yeah, a few people. Okay. In fact, Gartner, is a very powerful company, and they do a huge amount of studies across the world about trends, where things are going, and they're highly respected, their opinion. And when I used to work with PwC, IBM, Ernst & Young, and it's like we're always getting the Gartner and Forrester reports out to see where the trends are going, and they're usually quite right. This is a graph that Forrester comes out with quite frequently. This is done in 2016, and this is called the Gartner Hype Curve, which you may or may not have heard about. So typically, there's something called the innovation trigger, and it's like all this hype, whether it's one technology or another, the public get involved, like artificial AI or big data. People don't really understand what it's all about, but it's like, oh yeah, let's invest in it. And so you get this amazing hype curve. And in 2016, 2017, blockchain was there, and they predicted this at the end of 2016. And but nonetheless, people just right to this point of the peak of inflated expectations, okay, which we witnessed in the sort of third quarter of last year. And then what happens is, inevitably, that it dives into this thing called the trough of disillusionment, okay? And I think that everyone in the blockchain space, cryptocurrency, is kind of familiar with this trough of disillusionment. And then once you reach this bottom, okay, and when you're at the bottom, you can only go in one direction, right? That's up. You climb this thing called the slope of enlightenment, okay? And so here, blockchain, okay? And then it's funny how these guys predict it, and they've done this with a lot of folks. And then, so we're bottoming out now, and then we get Hedera, the public net, goes live, this year, a little later this year, and we're just at the sort of like the beginning of the slope of enlightenment and getting into the plateau of productivity, which is in many ways the sort of like when this thing becomes mainstream, like the internet, when was the first killer app, and when did everyone accept it as a way of life? And I think that Hedera is ideally placed for this, okay? and I think I encourage everyone to really collaborate and build these applications which are useful, no matter how small they are, so that we can climb this slope of enlightenment and share information. So that was kind of aside, and so this, from our perspective, this is the challenge that we face. It's that modern society has an unquenchable thirst for electricity. Everything we do requires electricity. And so I looked this up in Wikipedia. Apparently, we consume about 33 kilowatt hours of electricity per day on average per person. And so, what does that look like? Because it's, it's just numbers. So if you do 33 cycles of your washing machine, it's about that amount. If you're watching a big screen TV for 99 hours without stopping, if that's your style, then that consumes that electricity. Or if you boil a kettle 330 times, that's the sort of amount of electricity you use on average a day. Okay. Now this is in comparison to 16% of the world's population, which is 1.2 billion people, who have no electricity whatsoever. Okay, and these people are trapped in poverty. And so there is this great vulnerability. There's this great vulnerability, and I think that we don't understand how vulnerable we actually are as a society. And in terms of just infrastructure, I mean, these are kind of US-centric, because I gave this talk in Dallas a little while ago, last year. Hurricane Florence, it's like, 890,000 homes without electricity for a long period of time. Fukushima, in the Tohoku earthquake, 4.4 million homes without electricity for a long period of time. And so a lot of this vulnerability to the infrastructure can be avoided. And the reason why we are so vulnerable in the way we use electricity and supply it is that basically in every country we have big honking power stations, and that pumps electricity in a unidirectional way to the end consumer. Okay? Now, this style is high risk, unreliable, expensive, and as we know, it's very, very polluting. Most of the power stations are gas or oil powered, and or nuclear power, and so this is an issue. Exposure to this vulnerable infrastructure. As we go forward, there are more and more of these sort of force majeure events, which are taking out electricity in large areas. Difficult to manage the fluctuations in demand, and an example is like if we're watching the World Cup final, and the referee blows a whistle at halftime, and we go off to the kitchen, turn on the kettle for a cup of tea, put some microwaves in the put some pizzas in the microwave, which is fine for us. But when you have 50 million people doing the same thing, that sudden charge, the sudden demand in energy, is a problem for the grid managers, the grid companies, and the power operators to manage. And that's just a silly example, but of course it becomes very serious. And then tenuous procurement of energy from foreign sources. I mean, the UK is buying half of its electricity from the Europe, basically, from French nuclear power stations. And this is on the cusp of Brexit, and on all of these, they're all on the EC contracts, and they're all going to have to be renegotiated. But because of the confusion of Brexit, I don't think anyone's actually sat down and thought, what are we going to do about this? And in the meantime, of course, prices of this type of infrastructure are rising higher and higher. Now, this is sort of like a UK-centric thing. You can see that before the North Sea gas and oil, that we had a huge dependency on foreign electricity imports. And then there was, it changed during the big production of North Sea gas. But then now in 2017-18, we've gone back to this huge dependency on electricity from foreign imports. And you can see that you can't really see it actually. Well, anyway, there is a map on this, but you can see all of these connections to Denmark, Norway, France, etc. And all of these were planned prior to Brexit. But since that's happened, things are going to change. In contrast, of course, there's been a definite increase in the amount of renewable electricity that Britain is producing. So, what are we going to do about it? Okay, so instead of having this unidirectional flow of electricity from power stations to the consumer, what we're going to do is create an omnidirectional electricity generation, storage, and consumption through the use of microgrids. And this solution is cheap, reliable, and safe, okay? Energy stability through the use of virtual power plants. Every microgrid is going to be a capacitor for electrical energy. It can store wind energy, solar energy, geothermal energy, and when it's needed, can be released, thus stabilizing the national grid and the power stations. Risk mitigation. If there is an earthquake in Los Angeles and the power goes down, microgrids in different parts of California will still be going. Storms that take out grid infrastructures won't affect the microgrid technologies because they're standalone. Okay, with renewable energy microgrids, this empowers the community to manage their energy. Okay, which I'll go into in a moment. Energy cost reductions. Electricity bills going up and up. However, if you look at renewable energy tech, the price of PV and other related, heat pumps, etc., are going down and down and down, which in turn reduces the overheads and running costs of renewable energy microgrids. New investment opportunities. The platform we're developing on Hedera has financial and electrical value on the platform, and it's an ideal platform for microfinancing. And we plan to implement investment-grade microfinancing packages through our microgrids, so they can evolve and help finance. It doesn't have to be here in the UK. The microgrid can be extended to other countries, including developing countries. And so we can help nations achieve their sustainable development goals according to the COP21, COP22, etc., and set the pathway to inclusion for all of these people who are trapped in poverty and deprived of electricity, and eventually democratize the use of electricity. I'm going to do a couple of demos of the system later, if I can connect to the internet. So, in order to develop this, there are prerequisites, because microgrid technology is not difficult, easy to manage. We need high performance. You can imagine the volumes of data that are produced when you generate 1 kilowatt of hour of electricity, then consume it on an ongoing basis across multiple microgrids. You need to have accurate, customizable reporting, both financial and non-financial is important. And plus, security, governance, and security are very important as well. And in fact, Bitcoin, Ethereum, if you go through the list, don't really meet those of the criteria, especially in this area of low energy transactions, because if you spend too much energy on a per transaction basis like Bitcoin, then you're actually using up more electricity than you're buying and selling. Whereas Hedera actually meets that criteria very well. So our development is split into 3 levels. We have transactions, we have payments, and we have reporting. And so the transaction layer is all of the prosumers and consumers of electricity and the smart contracts that manage the interactions. And then the financial settlements is the payments between the counterparties. And the reporting is to all the stakeholders. There has to be a customized form of reporting. And we do this in structured data, which I'll go into. Now, in order for us to do that, we've had to design 2 database architectures. One is a 100% decentralized database, where each of the nodes or homeowners owns its own database, and every time there's an interaction or an update, there has to be consensus across the network, okay? And I can show you how that works. The other one is a centralized database, where every time there's an interaction with a database, there is a consensus is required. And it's according to a set of predetermined rules, and these rules can be edited and evolved. So I'm going a bit fast here, but I need to get through a few slides. So this gives you those 3 layers that I was talking about. You have the transaction layer, which is the energy producers and the consumers, and the smart contracts that manage the 2, the peer-to-peer energy trading. The second one is all of the settlements in cryptocurrency between the various counterparties. And the bottom one, the structured data reporting, is, of course, all the financials, the accounting, the balance sheets, and P&L statements, and the non-financial reporting, which is all the sustainable development reporting, etc., and the 2 need to be integrated. So this is a high-level architectural view of a project that we have in the UK at the moment in Corby, that's in the north of London a little bit, Glendale Eco Homes. We have 45 homes and 2 apartment blocks, and we've received private funding and also funding from Innovate UK to develop this, and we're expecting to go live in May, June this year. So it's actually not long to go. And so we integrate the network that we have, which is a mixture of private and public networks developed on the Swirls and Hedera SDK. And we have something called an open integration bus, which is kind of a fancy name for our APIs and programming language wrappers that we have, integrated to these vendors of metering and control devices in these passive homes that we're building currently in Corby. And we integrate to them at the IoT level to control the environment. And the IoT ecosystem control and the peer-to-peer energy trading happens through the management dashboards. This is another view of something we're doing, which is on a slightly bigger scale. In England, there's a lot of like wind farms and solar farms, and quite often some of these installations actually have to turn themselves off because the grid can't deal with it. So what we're going to do is create this power operating system, or a virtual power plants, which can take energy and store it from the outside, so that all of these renewable energy farms can operate on a continual, steady basis, just like the power stations can. And this will stabilize and make the whole process more efficient. Power stations operate like at 30% efficiency, and during transmission, there's like a 20% loss of electricity. And hopefully, by integrating and collaborating with our Power OS or virtual power plants, this will stabilize and make the whole process more efficient. This is that layer, the transaction layer, the top layer. Now, we're developing this on the Hedera SDK, and this is work in progress. So we're using each of the homes is going to have like a solar inverter. I don't know if all this jargon is of interest to you, but basically what it does is collects electricity. The inverter is responsible for charging the battery, or supplying electricity to the house. And then we have smart meters, electricity meters, which monitors all the electricity going in and out. And it's controlled through our user interface. All the transactions come through. We have a smart contract manager that we're programming in Solidity, and the HBAR wallet for payments to the utility or the grid operator and the microgrid manager, which is power transition. And we're working with the grid operator in Corby, GTC, to do this. So you see, they're in a win-win situation. At the moment, all they're doing is this unidirectional electricity flow from the power stations to the end user. They send the bills, expect to be paid. But in this scenario, there is going to be peer-to-peer energy trading between all the prosumers and consumers via the microgrid. And so every time there's transfer electricity in any direction, using their infrastructure, they get some share of the pie, and they're going to have their own Hedera wallet, and they've really bought into this, and they're very excited about this project going live. Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of demos now. The first demo is this 100% decentralized database, and what I've done is I'm just going to have to just take this out, and go down here and get my thing up. See if they're logging in. Okay, so I have these are. Hang on, I'll log into root. Okay, so I'll just make that. Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh my God. I need to take this thing down. Why is it still in this mode? If I say escape, it shouldn't be there anymore. So if I go here, so if I kill that completely, there it is, gone. Yeah, sorry, it's just yeah. So yeah, if I go to this, I mean, and here, we have 3 modules, as I said, we have 3 layers of programming, and this is the initial sort of like the user. What it does is configures the user. Every time the homeowner is invited to join the grid, and they input their name, their address, all of this private information into the app. And then they click on Save Personal Data. The color resolution is not very good on here, I'm sorry, so it's not very clear. And when they click Save Personal Data, what it does is produces a public key, which is an SHA-256 compatible public key. It's one of these big, long, ugly numbers. And then this public key is linked to what's called a GM code, which is the grid member. Okay, so once the owner is configured, he inputs or she inputs the type of equipment they have. You know, the total surface of these the solar panels and the orientations, etc., to determine the overall production capability. And then what we have is a summary of the entire microgrid. So each piece of information updates to the databases with consensus, and then it calculates the production capability with the income. And that is also presented in analytics in terms of solar and geothermal, etc. Now, what I'm going to do is just see if I can, oh, sorry about this, it's a bit difficult. So now, all of the users have the same login, and there is a role-based login. So it's not just a user, but the user can log in as a root as well, or an administrator. And the administrator is slightly different, it has a dashboard. And what it does is creates, you can have a look at the audit trail, which is every time there's an interaction with the database, there has to be consensus across the network, and it seeks that. So I'll just give you a quick, I'll just quickly show you. So if I go, see the last update here was for a GM1, the grid member 1. And so if I look at grid member 2, this is GM2, and I go into some of the production data, and in fact this surface area is wrong, it's 23, the capacity is actually 339, and next, and then if I say update, and then I go to the root, you can see that GM2 is updated successfully and got consensus across this across the network, and you can see that the values, etc., coincide with the inputs we put in there. Okay, and in fact, we've been very impressed by the gossip consensus protocol. It's very fast and very efficient, and you know, compared to other, we've worked with NEM, Ethereum, EVM, and stuff like that, and Hashgraph is quick and snappy and precise, which unfortunately the others aren't. Now, what we do also is to collect information across the entire microgrid. So, in fact, the nodes are pinging each other pretty much once a second to get this, to make sure that the other nodes are live and pinging. So we collect that information too in something called ledger events. We can also execute a query directly to the database, and following consensus, it updates. Now, so if I just go into the configuration, if I look at the public key of a microgrid configuration, basically this shows you the evolution of each of the homes that have been put onto the microgrid right from the beginning. So as I evolve my network, as I add new solar panels, I change my heat pump and make the whole microgrid more productive and more profitable, then I can see my entire evolution. Now, what I can do is, if I go into my own ID, I can actually edit it. So if I go into that, I can say edit, and I can modify it. It takes me down to your energy production, okay? And what I said before is that this information is collected, excuse me, I'm sort of fiddling around here a bit, in structured data. And the thing about structured data is that it's a bit dull, and it's not very glamorous, but it is the way everyone reports in financial services across the world, and government agencies, regulators, and tax authorities, okay? And what I've done is I created a little app, and you can download it and have a look. So if I open this in one of these guys like WordPad, okay, and you can see that, I mean, it's not very glamorous looking, but to a computer, it's very it's milk and honey. And what this does is tags and labels every single piece of information that's coming in or going out of the microgrid. Okay, so that when the information is collected, you can slice and dice and drill through the information. The business intelligence is built into the language, and this is exactly what HMRC and Companies House, CoRep, FinRep, Eurofiling, SEC, they all use this. Okay, and this is the way they report. What we're going to do is create the reports, HMRC reports. So if there's any VAT or anything that's required to be, filed and declared from the microgrid, it can be done directly through the through the reporting system. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is quickly go on to my other module, which if I can find it. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. So this module is a reporting module, which also uses structured data as well. And what we do is we're reporting non-financial. It's a non-financial report, which is based on something called GRI. It's a global reporting standard, and we've taken their taxonomies and created this into a structured data format. And basically, every node is able to report the fuel consumed, the electricity bills, how much energy they're producing, and then create a sustainability report, which can be integrated directly into the financial. So you get an integrated financial and non-financial report. Okay, and also we have this little the gossip protocol working here. You should see the video if you haven't. And this is the same for the. I just log in here, and so we have this across the network. So if I go into report, I can see here, this gives me all of the indicators from the energy consumption, the energy declarations indicator from GRI standards, and the users input that into a report. A lot of this can be done automatically eventually. Bills, electricity consumption, production can be input directly into this report. And this information you can slice and dice very easily. So if I add a column here, say 2016, 2017, and 2018. Where is that? Here. Okay. And this gives you for Corby, Glendale, Lingo Homes, all nodes. So this gives you a report across the entire network. And if I scroll down, you can see it gives me like an analytics, total consumption details of each year, consumed versus sold, the energy intensity calculations, and how I'm improving and reducing. So then I can actually say I keep it for the same year, say 2018, and I can actually compare. So if I have node 1 and node 2 and node 3, see, I want to do a comparison of how things are changing according to my declarations of my indicators for each of these nodes. And so it gives you an output, the same thing. So there's all sorts of different ways to compare the reporting for this microgrid. And all of the information is according to a set of rules. These are very simple rules, and they can be made more sophisticated. But you can put parameters in. In other words, if something's too low, something's too high, you can catch that very quickly through validation. And if it doesn't obey that, it will actually won't reach consensus. So if I give you an example, if I say home, and I look at this, and I say modify, okay? And if I want to change something, say total electricity sold, if I put, say, an XX in there, which is, wrong, obviously, and I say update, if I just look at another node, I just bring that up, and you'll see that this consensus never occurred in gossip because the parameters were out of range according to the rules, okay? And so if I look back here at the input, this has been flagged as an error and consensus wasn't reached. So if we go back into this, if the owner of the node goes back into this and changes that to actually 7.6, which is the correct value, and does an update, and we look back here, you'll see that it is valid and it has reached consensus. Okay, that's a very simple example, but it kind of makes it idiot-proof. And we're in the process of integrating all of these units together. Okay, I think I have pretty much covered everything. I mean, there might have been some things that I haven't shown you. I forget now what we've done, but I think that's pretty much. I'm sorry, I had to put my microphone down. I think that's pretty much it. If I go back to my meetup, I think. If there's any questions, please feel free. I know that I've covered quite a lot of stuff here. I think that's. Yeah, that's it. That was the end of the presentation. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll just give you this. I can kind of.
Yeah, thanks. Taking into account our current battery technology, how do you see development of decentralized grids? As you say, the storage would become a question, and within that network, how do you see development of storage taking place? Thanks.
Well, I think storage is actually a very interesting area, and for instance, you know, it's like all of the homes we're building in Glendale, Eco Homes, has got a car charging point. So if you can drive your Tesla up, plug it into the microgrid, and the Tesla battery becomes part of the microgrid instantly. So theoretically, if there's someone who's got up at midnight and cooking some pizzas in the microwave, they could be buying electricity from your Tesla. And then, so, you can actually gain money by selling electricity that's stored there. And battery technology, and we're actually using several. BYD is a Chinese battery that we're using with Victron, the inverter. And, the prices are going down and down. And, as the microgrids grow, it presents a huge amount of capacitance for electricity that's being generated either from other renewable sources or the national grid itself. It's like we've had NEC knocking at our door, and they want to have these big honking warehouses of batteries, and they want to actually use this as a trading platform. In other words, it's filling up, charging up the batteries when the electricity is really cheap, and then at peak hours they sell it again at a much higher rate. And all you have to do is have battery and an automated trading platform, and Bob's your uncle. Is there anything else? Commercially viable option, come to us, and we'll be more than happy to plug in and use it. We've had a lot of different types of organizations. There's garbage incineration, generating electricity from that, and other areas, some water tower pumping and stuff. But at the moment, they're not as commercially efficient as batteries, as far as I know. But if there's anything else, let's talk about it. I'll be more than interested.
Hi, I'm curious to ask you about the region or the boundaries or where the service is available. I mean, am I right in thinking that it's like a technology in a sense that you can employ? I mean, does it matter where you are in the world to actually be up or connected to your company?
Actually, no, it's not. The only constraint is that when you send electricity from point A to point B, there is a loss. You know, there's resistance in the line, inefficiency of transformers, etc. So there is a loss, and that loss has to be taken into consideration. So every time we send electricity, depending on the distance, there's more charges to pay and more electricity to send. But, okay, this is a project we're working in sub-Saharan Africa. And there are communities there that have no electricity whatsoever. You know, and they've never had electricity. And the governments can't afford put the, you know, the wiring infrastructure, the pylons and stuff out to a little community. Okay? So what we're doing is we're collaborating with the telecom companies, and in a container kit, we have a telecom tower. Okay, and the telecom tower is completely self-sufficient in that it works on a solar panel. It's a solar charge, which is better in a way because it's a steady stream of electricity for the telecom tower. And once that's connected to the internet, it's connected to our Hedera microgrid technology platform. Okay, so all the value's there, and we can actually, I mean, people in here, the room, the community, can actually invest in microfinancing to these sub-Saharan community, and we can build a microgrid in that community itself. The wiring, the equipment, okay, the solar panels, etc., etc. So it can create a microeconomy in this area and help, you know, with medical, etc., etc. There's endless possibilities. And plus the fact that we can report not only to the stakeholders and the investors directly through our non-financial structured data reporting, but we can actually report to the local governments because, you know, they're going to want tax, they're going to want some regulatory disclosures, etc. So my answer is that it's not restricted at all. And once a microgrid is established locally in Corby, we can extend it to, you know, the neighbors, and we can, you know, it can even be microfinanced in the local communities in the UK as well. You know, the structure itself, what you want to avoid is doing transactions of value over a long distance because of the loss of power through transmission.
What if you're generating, say you've got a wind farm and you're generating locally energy and power, can you actually monitor that to use energy for yourself and then sell the extra onto a third party?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what we're working on is optimization algorithms. I mean, a lot of people, you know, they want to do trading and stuff on their own. And eventually, I mean, you could be riding the tube and there could be some website saying, you know, if you have energy you want to trade, you know, log into here and you could just do your trading. But what we're trying to do also is to optimize this operation so that, you know, if you look offshore in the you know, Thames Estuary or offshore Brighton, you know, there's these massive farms and more agricultural fields which are not so rich in, you know, the soil and crops. It's more profitable for them to install these solar panels, and they have grass in between, they feed some sheep and stuff like that, and they're selling off their electricity. And so they can produce electricity and store it locally even, steadily throughout the day, and be assured that they will always be producing and they will always get payments. Because if the national grid can't take it because of issues that they often have, they're not in lockdown mode because they can always sell it to local microgrids. You know, a local microgrid, and the local microgrid can store it in its batteries, And then in turn, when the demand goes up, they can sell it and do a deal with the local wind farm or the local solar farm. And all of these things are possible. And what it's going to do is add stability to the national grid in the UK, which it desperately needs, because at the moment it's very unstable and we have a huge dependency on foreign imports, and this is the way out. And we're offering a win-win to the grid operators. The people who will whine a bit, perhaps, are the actual power stations. But since most of them are overseas anyway, that's not really our concern. We give individual empowerment and cost reduction and less polluting.
Hi. Who are your competitors?
Well, there are a number of competitors. There is the Power Ledger. It's an Australian company. There is Brooklyn Microgrid, both of which I know and I've spoken to extensively. I've been to Brooklyn and seen these people, and I've in Perth and seen what they do. And I mean, that's absolutely cool, because what we encourage, and there's also a couple of projects in Europe that are happening now as well. And we don't see them as competition. We see them as collaboration opportunities, because at the end of the day, what will make this a success is the collaboration of all of these microgrids and the integration of them, okay? And the integration of multiple levels of these networks and subnetworks, okay? And what we consider is that Hedera is very well placed in becoming like a microgrid operating system, because of the level of transactions it can handle, okay, and the volumes, so that we can be the pack horse, if you will, of this energy microgrid domain. And we would like to be able to exchange value and knowledge with all of these other microgrids. So we like to talk to everybody, and we are not we're not building a silo at all in our technology. There's huge room for everybody, and our main objective is to get this mainstream, because of the exactly what Ollie was saying. We are destroying our climate, and power stations and the grid system are one of the great agents provocateurs of all of this. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, firstly, I want to say a huge thank you to Jiro, Shiv, and Ollie for the presentation. So if we can give another round of applause. We have some time set aside now to do some networking, for you to ask further questions. There's myself, Paul, and Daniel Francis from the Hedera team that's here. So we have some snacks and some drinks, so come and join us, and it'll be good to get to know everybody. Thank you.